Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It is terrific to be here. I will be honest with you, the notion that I was going to give a lecture was a little bit, was a moment I had to give pause to because, lecturing is advocating, yes, cajoling, yes, persuading, maybe, lecturing, it reminds me of college and long hours spent thinking I should just get these notes from someone else. But I want to thank the Alter family particularly for honoring me with the opportunity to give the first Joanne Alter lecture at the Chicago Humanities Festival. I think it is a terrific honor for so many reasons. I think most importantly, it's an honor because of who Joanne Alter was. Joanne Alter is a great role model for all women in America who want to impact the world they live in. She, when you really think about what she did, confronting Chicago machine politics in the 70s, yikes. As a woman, yikes. Being asked to run and successfully winning an office in Cook County in the 70s at that moment in time, that takes guts and that takes courage. Being one of the first environmentalists to really begin focusing on what we were doing to the air and the water and the land that we need and that we love. Someone really, if you boil it down, and I think this is why I'm so attracted to her legacy, she considered tough a compliment. And what a great thing for a woman to consider tough a compliment, especially a woman who wants to impact public policy through the world of politics. Now, the other thing about this lecture that kind of allowed me to breathe a little easier is that the theme this year for this thing is laughter. So now, laughter, lecture, a little oxymoronic, but I'm going to do my best to put a light touch to what I'm going to talk about today and hopefully get everyone, if not laughing, at least smiling several different times during this presentation. So many women have come before us that have made it easier for us to be women in political life. And obviously, we honor Joanne today, but I also have to mention my mother. My mother and Joanne have a lot in common in that they both began advocating for women's active participation in politics in the 60s and 70s. My mother, while she worked hard in the home trying to move mountains of public policy, she didn't have a paying job outside the home. So I grew up listening to her on the telephone, saying, I need to speak to the governor right now. I don't care if you don't know who I am. I need to speak to the governor right now. I remember being tricked into thinking that using a sponge to do the envelopes for the direct mails, that somehow I was cool because I got to use the sponge to put all the flyers in the envelopes that we sent out for candidates. I remember giving out nail files and wearing the straw hats with the red, white, and blue ribbon on them at various functions, saying, vote for this person, vote for that person. In fact, my mother is the one who made me say in October of 1960, trick or treat and vote for JFK. So, and when she got elected to the city council, I now have great warmth about what she did. At the time, I was mortified. She got elected to the city council when I was like a freshman in high school, at that moment in time where your mother can do nothing but embarrass you. Everything my mother did was embarrassing. The idea that she was running for public office was embarrassing. The idea that she won was embarrassing. And of course, we had to go down and watch her get sworn in. Well, Mom, without saying anything to us, carries a brown paper bag up to the dais with her to take her oath to become a member of the city council in Columbia, Missouri, who had never seen a woman as a city council person before. And as they called on her to take her oath, she stood up And I'm sitting like, halfway back in the middle. And she opens this paper bag, and much to my horror, out comes a vase with flowers, which she sits at her place. Next, out comes a photograph of all 4 children that she sat at her place. And then finally, with great relish, she pulls out of the paper bag an apron and ties it on her, and then raises her hand to take the oath. I was mortified. I thought I would never recover from my embarrassment. Now I realize how strong and smart she was to have that moment of symbolism, signifying that there was a new and different kind of voice that was going to be on the city council. So I thought what I'd do today is briefly go through what I think, if Joanne were here, she would agree that these are lessons that women in politics need to take to heart. I've been doing this a long time. I have many scars from various political battles I've engaged in. And even though some of these lessons are generalizations, and I know we must be very careful about generalizations when it comes to gender, these are lessons that I have learned, and frankly, I think that if both my mother and Joanne were here, they would say absolutely right. So let's go through the 6 lessons. Since this is about laughter, this Chicago Humanities Festival, I will start with, I think, a very important one. Don't take yourself too seriously. There have been women, I think, that have mistaken a serious demeanor and a matter of being a slave to the wonkish policy, really to an extreme, and then along the way, their inability to laugh at themselves and to laugh with others has hindered them in terms of their political skills, because this is, after all, at the end of the day, a people business, and humor is very, very important. If you've had children, it helps to not take yourself too seriously. I will tell you one of my favorite stories that certainly got my attention about taking myself too seriously. My son was in the 2nd grade, my oldest, and he came home and he said, "Mom, I've got to write something about what you do during the day." Well, at the time, I was the elected DA in Kansas City. My office was handling between 8,000 and 10,000 felonies a year. I had a staff of hundreds of lawyers that were working on the most serious crimes imaginable, and so I sat down with my son and I said, honey, I'm the most important prosecutor in Jackson County. I'm the boss. I'm in charge of all prosecution. I'm the one in charge of putting all criminals in jail. I'm a big deal. And of course, thinking that he would use this and write, one of those great little things you can put in the scrapbook and save. Oh, how cute, I don't know where he got all that. So about a week later, I get a note home from the teacher. And it was sealed, which is always a bad sign when the envelope is sealed. And I open the envelope, and there's a little note from the teacher saying, "I thought you might want this one for your scrapbook." And enclosed inside on his big red chief tablet was the headline, "What My Mom Does During the Day." And the first line said as follows, and I'll quote exactly, "My mom is the best prostitute in Jackson County." So, that's what you get for taking yourself too seriously. A woman who wants to have success with public policy and therefore politics needs to understand that the recipe is not delicious unless there is spice. And I think the main ingredients of the recipe are ambition and hard work and education, but the spice is humor. And learning how to deal with other people in a way that makes them feel comfortable, in a way that we can all share humanity with a good laugh. The second lesson is, do we offend or do we appease? I know that there are many women in the audience that have the disease to appease, the disease to please, the disease to make everyone happy. It is a generalization, but I have met many women in political life that we're very afraid of offending people. And I've got to tell you, I think offending people is very much a requirement of the job. You have to be willing to offend in order to make any progress whatsoever. And that's where Joanne Alter's penchant for being tough really revealed itself, because you're tough if you are willing to offend, to try to move policy in a way that you can really get things done. The third lesson is you can't be a victim and a leader at the same time. Now, I have had so many times along the way. I started running for office in 1982. I was very young, I was very thin, I was darn cute. I had lots of blonde hair, and I had a lot of opportunities at that point in time to be offended by people treating me a certain way. And there were so many moments I had to decide, am I going to be a victim in this situation, or am I going to blow right past that and be a leader? I'll tell you one of my favorite stories among many that are, and this is one I can tell in public company. There were many that I couldn't tell in public company because they were so offensive, but I sat down as a young assistant prosecutor, and I was given a big case to try, and we were taking depositions of the victim, and I went into the conference room to begin the deposition and couldn't believe it when I saw that the defense lawyer was the former elected prosecutor who had been in charge of the office I worked in for many years and was a legend in the courthouse, well known by all the judges. I mean, this was going to be a formidable opponent. And I walk in with the witness that was going to be deposed, and as I sat down at the table with the court reporter, trying my very best to look like I was in command of the situation, he looked over at me and he said, "Honey, I need a yellow pad of paper, I need a sharpened pencil, I need a red pen, I need a blue pen, I need a cup of coffee, I take a little bit of cream and 1 sugar." Now, that was one of those moments. And if you knew me better, you would know that it could have gone either way at that moment. I took a deep breath, and I thought as quickly as I could about the consequences of me confronting him and what that would mean in that environment, especially with his victim sitting there, and how it might put the victim in a position that they were worried about what was going to happen. And so I calmly said, "Absolutely, Mr. Gepford." And I got up and I left, and I went and I got the yellow pad, and I got the pencil, and I got the red pen and the blue pen, and I bought him his coffee just the way he liked it. And then I proceeded, after the deposition was over, to work as hard as I've ever worked on that case. And when the time came, I kicked his tail all over that courtroom. So it is an example of when you have that, should I be a victim or should I be a leader? The other story I'll tell you was a very hurtful story, and the reason it's kind of funny is how it's come full circle. I was a freshman legislator, and there were 7 lawyers in my freshman class in 1983. 6 of them were men, and me. In fact, I was the only woman attorney in the House of Representatives in Missouri, 186 people. And I found out after the fact that the lawyers, the 6 guys, had formed a club called the Six-Pack. And of course, I was the odd man out in the Six-Pack, or the odd woman out, as the case may be. So they did not ask me to join their club, and after months went by and we'd have these hearings, and I would realize these guys were kind of screwing with my stuff. You know, they were doing motions to try to stop my hearings from going forward on bills that I was doing. Finally, one of them came to me and was kind of embarrassed and said, "Claire, you need to know, there's this club and you're not part of it, and they're having great fun at your expense, trying to figure out ways to mess with your legislation." And my office was in the bottom of the Capitol. I was a freshman legislator, and I went in my office and I shut the door and I cried. I couldn't believe these guys would be that mean. It just was so hurtful. But I didn't say anything, went on. Now fast forward 20-some years, almost 30 years, there are 3 members of the Six-Pack that have all called me for appointments. One of them wants to be a federal judge. One of them wants a job in Washington. One of them wants a job in Missouri that I might have some influence over. Now, I have not talked to them about the Six-Pack Club when they called, but it has been tempting. We are friends, but I guess, once again, not being confrontational under those circumstances, but yet keeping my head down and working hard. As it turns out, I ended up in a position that could have a direct impact on their lives, probably much more so than they realized back when they were having meetings of the six-pack. Taking criticism personally doesn't work. I love this joke that Elaine Boosler tells. You know, we have women in the military, but they don't put us on the front lines. They don't want us to go into combat. And there's a sense that maybe we're not willing to fight. Maybe a sense that we can't kill in battle. And as Elaine Boosler says, I think we can. All the general has to do is walk over to the women and say, "You see the enemy over there? They say you look fat in those uniforms." The fourth lesson is to take risks. Oh, it's hard. It is very hard, especially when you win a race and you think, oh, I've got it, and I've been reelected a few times. Why push for the next step? Why, let that ambition move you forward? I have taken a lot of risks, and some have turned out very well, some not so well. I will tell you honestly that the biggest risk I took was a complete disaster. I had spent most of my life, from the time I was about 12 or 13 years old, I had some teachers tell me how I needed to run for governor someday. And my mother, of course, loved the idea, as you might imagine, and so she reinforced, and my father too, pushing me into speech contests and the debate squad and encouraging me to go to law school, and always there was this little undercurrent that I was going to be the first woman governor of Missouri. And so I kind of focused on this goal. I focused on it for a long, long time, and the moment came when it was, I thought, the right time to run for governor, and I took a huge risk by running against the incumbent governor of my own party. So not only was I trying to smash one of those ceilings, I was trying to do what Joanne H did and shake up the political establishment along the way, because you might imagine a sitting governor kind of had the support of the party structure. So I ran that race, and I won that primary. And I won it going away. And then I thought, well, this next step's easy. The general's not going to be hard. I've defeated an incumbent governor, and the guy running in November is very young, and he looks 12, and he hasn't really held that many offices, and just because he's Roy Blunt's son doesn't mean that he's going to be able to beat me, and so forth and so forth and so on. And he did defeat me. He defeated me by 2 points. It was a close election. I was devastated. I couldn't believe it had happened. And I spent 2 or 3 months on the couch with a constant plate of warm chocolate chip cookies at my side until a guy in the audience, my husband, Joseph Shepard, grabbed my hand and said, you need to get up and take another risk. And so, what a great idea, taking on an incumbent Republican in the Senate race 2 years later. And it was kind of an all or nothing deal. If I hadn't won the Senate race, I would probably be done, because once you've lost 2 major races in a state, it's generally time to turn your attention to some other interest. So running for the Senate was a huge risk, and I got to tell you, until the first Wednesday in November of 2006, I always thought when my Girl Scout leaders said, when one door closes, another door opens, was just Girl Scout hooey. As it turns out, it was really true, and that willingness to take a risk is a huge part of a recipe for success as it relates to women in politics. The 5th lesson is to do not plant the flag without looking back. I have many times in my career made this mistake, and I have learned from those mistakes, but that moment when you say, I am going to do this, we are going to do this, we are going to do this, and you turn around and you look over your shoulder and there's no one there. And sometimes that's because we lose sight that our success depends so much on the people we work with, and that the strength of a leader is the strength of bringing people with you. And nothing hurts my heart more than when I encounter women who have succeeded in politics who are not very nice to their staffs, who are not respectful, and who are not inclusive. And under that old adage, pick on somebody your own size. I don't know where it comes from that people that in positions of power think that it's okay to demean or berate people that work for you. But back when I was explaining to my son what a great prosecutor I was, the first 6 months in that office, I was so busy having press conferences, I hadn't bothered to slow down and talk to all those lawyers and congratulate them on the incredible work they were doing. And as I saw the shift in the morale in the office, as I spent more and more time reaching out to people working with me, I realized it was going to be much easier planting that flag the more time I spent encouraging and rewarding and recognizing the great work of those people that I was lucky enough to work with. The last lesson is one that's hard for women sometimes, and I think we need to be honest about this. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. You know, sometimes we are hypercritical of other women and not as critical of men with the same behavior. And I think I've had many examples of that. Some people call it the queen bee syndrome, that one woman makes it and doesn't want anybody else to make it. I will tell you my favorite We Are Our Own Worst Enemy story as we begin to close this down and hopefully take some time for some questions. I was a young state representative, and those were back in the days, in the early 80s, when all the women still tried to dress like men. I'm sure many of you remember. We had khaki or charcoal gray suits, generally straight skirts that went somewhere below the knee, and little floppy ties that were our vision of the necktie. Remember? Anybody remember? Yeah. I had a closet full of suits that really kind of reflected a desire to look like a guy. I was home on a weekend and I had a date. I was single. In fact, it was an unusual thing in Jefferson City, the state capital, that I was single and was dating somebody who was single. That was unique in and of itself. So I had a date, and I put on a fuzzy sweater, and I put on a leather skirt. Now, before you jump to conclusions, it wasn't that short. It was slightly above the knee, but it wasn't like as short as, frankly, my daughters wear now and give me a heart attack every time I see them in the short skirts. And we went out to the plaza, and we went to see a movie, and we had dinner, and on the way home, he said, well, I have a friend who's having a party. Why don't we stop by? And I said, great. And so we stopped by this house, and there were a lot of people there, and it was fun. And I happened to know the host of the party. He was a lawyer in town, and his parents were friends with my parents. And the next morning, he called me, and he said, Claire, I've got to tell you this story about when you and Joe Leone arrived at the party last night. He said, you walked in the door, and this woman sitting next to me said, well, who in the world is that? And I got the sense she was talking about you, so I turned to her, and I said, well, that's a state representative. And she said, well, I don't care. He didn't have to bring a tramp with him. Don't be hard on other women. Do what Joanne Alter did. When it was time for her to keep doing things that made a difference, she began working with tutoring. Reach out to other women, mentor, encourage. We need to support one another, and along the way, most of us have had incredible support from the men in our lives too. And so that kind of support is terrific. And nothing is harder than when women are hard on other women for no apparently good reason. Lose the gossip, lose the criticism, reach out. I want to thank you all for taking time out of a beautiful Saturday afternoon to be here. I look forward to answering your questions, and most of all, I want to take one last opportunity to recognize a special woman who made a difference in Chicago for all the right reasons, Joanne Alter. Thank you very much.
Can we talk about you as a senator? What do you think are the prospects? I have two big questions. One,
let me guess, health care.
No, an increased in another stimulus package and Afghanistan?
Oh, let's see, how much time do we have? I think it's unlikely that there will be another stimulus plan. First of all, we've got a huge chunk of the original stimulus that is out there, including hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts that are continuing to flow into people's pockets, working class people's pockets, middle class families' pockets with every paycheck. We also have a lot of money that is still in the pipeline as it relates to incentives for clean energy, renewable energy, a lot of incentives still in the pipeline for broadband deployment, a lot of incentives and money still in the pipeline for infrastructure work. So I think it's going to continue to work on the economy. I think it did certainly help stabilize our economy. But I think it's very hard for us to get out of a recession with just government spending. I think it is dangerous, especially in light of the deficit right now, for us to focus too much on government spending. I think it could backfire on us now, because we're now looking at a situation that some of the major powers in the world, China and India, are looking at our financial situation, and they're like sharks seeing blood in the water. And there's actually real conversations going on out there in the international market about changing the international markets away from the dollar standard into a basket of currency. I mean, those are things that would have really long-term consequences for the safety and security of our nation. And I think we've got to really be careful now about this deficit and about this debt. Afghanistan, I'm proud that the president is, the last time that I'm going to take the risk of being slightly political here, the last time we had a president who decided it was a good idea to take a lot of troops into a foreign nation, they didn't take the time to figure out what happened after we toppled Saddam Hussein. There was not enough planning into what will occur and what will it mean to our men and women and to the resources of this nation and to our success in the Middle East. And I think that the fact that the president is being deliberate and thoughtful about what to do in Afghanistan is one of the reasons the American people elected him. They want him to be deliberate and thoughtful. I think he will probably, I have no idea, and the only thing I can tell you that's inside scoop is that the president said to me he thinks this may be the most difficult decision he has to make in these 4 years, because I think he knows we need to train and that it takes a significant amount of resources to train the Afghan police and military. And so I would assume that he will do something, but I don't know to what extent he will go with 10,000, 15,000, 40,000, or none of the above.
Many high-powered women today think that they can't be in politics or business and be seen fulfilling the traditional female roles of mother and wife because it will make them look weak. Do you think that is the case in your experience on the Senate floor, and how do you maintain that balance?
Well, I'm really bad at it. I have a tremendous amount of guilt that is beginning to lessen now because my kids are old enough that they're not at home anymore. So it's not quite as debilitating as it was at one point in time. And I will be honest with you, and I say this to young women all the time, the nice thing about a political career is your boss is the people. Now, that can be pesky when they think they have the right to say horrible things about you and run horrible commercials about you or your family. On the other hand, if you want to take the afternoon off and be the homeroom mother, there's nobody there you have to ask permission. You can take the afternoon off and go be homeroom mother. Or you can decide that your daughter's dance recitals are way more important than anything that you would be doing in your job. You have the right to prioritize your time that way. I will tell you a funny story, though, about my endorsement of Barack Obama. My 20-year-old daughter and I, she was still home from college when he won the Iowa primary, and I told her a million times, I'm going to endorse Barack Obama. It's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. I'm going to do it. And she was bugging me and bugging me and bugging me and on me and on me and on me, and I'm watching him give this speech on TV, and I'm laying on the couch crying. I mean, I am bawling like a baby. My 20-year-old daughter comes over, gets in my face, and she said, "How dare you? All of our lives, you've told us that you did this because you want to make a difference. The reason you couldn't be home after school, the reason you couldn't do all the things other mothers were doing is because you were making a difference. And now when the time is here to make a difference, you are thinking about yourself and your own political career. How do you look yourself in the mirror? Yikes! Woo! You know, talk about a 2x4 upside your head, out of the mouths of babes. And you know what? She was exactly right. And I then quickly endorsed Barack Obama because the guilt was overwhelming coming from my 20-year-old. But she was right in that I brought them along to a lot of things. I let them go in terms of their clothes weren't always pressed, they were clean. I will confess I did something really horrible, though. When I had one class that my daughter was in when she was about in the 3rd grade, my youngest daughter, and the mothers in that class were kind of mean to me. You know, I was the prosecutor, and I was on TV all the time, and they always kind of looked down their nose at me like somehow I wasn't a real mother. So it was my turn to bring treats for the Valentine's party. I hired somebody to write the names of all the kids in icing on the cupcakes. And I brought them in, and these mothers go, oh my goodness, I go, it wasn't anything. I had plenty of time. So that's a little true confession. I've never confessed that in public before.
In the state of Missouri, what do you think Robin Carnahan's chances are?
I think they are very good. I think Robin Carnahan is, first of all, she's very smart, she's very savvy, she's very driven, she knows what she's doing, she's not going to make mistakes. She's going to put herself in a position to win. Missouri is very, very tough. I passed my first amendment on the floor, and the vote was 51-49, and one of the old bulls came up to me and they said, well, Claire, that was, you know, really a close vote. And I said, Senator, in Missouri, we call that a landslide. So we got a break because Roy Blunt is really an incumbent in so many ways. So I think Robin can be the outsider in a year that's going to be very tough for incumbents, and I think that will help a great deal. But everybody hoped that we have the unemployment number below double digits because I think it's going to be very tough in a state like Missouri for Democrats to win if we don't get the unemployment number below a double-digit figure by about September of next year. She's got the microphone. We've got to lure her down here to the front.
Can you speak to the health care issue, both of Congress and the Senate, please?
Well, I don't really, there's so much I could talk about here. First of all, let me just give you my word of caution about New York 23. We are catching a tremendous break right now in my party because they have civil war in the Republican Party over purity of ideology. The conservatives in the Republican Party want purity. And Tim Pawlenty, who, by the way, is a moderate, is trying to make himself into a right-wing conservative, trying to follow the Pied Piper Palin into the land of obscurity of the far right. And, you have to remember how controversial it was when Chuck Schumer recruited Bob Casey. Do you remember this? Because he was not pro-choice. And how angry some people were that he had the nerve of Chuck Schumer to go to Pennsylvania and recruit a guy that wasn't pro-choice. Well, Chuck Schumer understood that to be a majority party, you have moderates in the party. There are no moderates left in the United States Senate in the Republican Party. Olympia and Susan are the last two women standing that are capable of real moderation in the Senate. So it will be a compromise in the Senate. I can't tell you what the compromise will be, but I think we're going to do more than anybody ever thought we could, do more that's ever been done in many, many years. I think the president has been a pragmatist about this, which I think has served him well. We'll know in about 2 hours what the vote was in the House, but they think they've got 220 votes, which means they're losing about 46 Democrats. Something like that, I think. I may have my numbers wrong. I lose track of all those guys over there. There's so many of them. But I'm optimistic that we will get a good health care bill. I just want everyone to take a deep breath and realize that agreeing and compromising within our caucus is the way we will stay the majority. Ben Nelson runs from Nebraska. John McCain won by 20 points. Blanche Lincoln is up for election in Arkansas. John McCain won by 20 points. Mary Landrieu from Louisiana. John McCain won in a landslide. These are senators who ran as moderates, got elected as moderates, and remain moderates. And because we've taken control of the Senate and the White House, they're not going to morph overnight into really liberal members of the Senate. So be patient so we don't have any New York 23s. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So what are the chances of having 60 Democratic votes in January of 2011?
I think they're pretty good. I think we may lose. I'll be honest with you. I think that Chris Dodd has got a fight on his hands. But I'm not saying I don't think he can do it. I do think he can do it. I think the people of Connecticut know him well. And I think there will be a real impetus on the part of progressives in Connecticut to help him and provide the passion that we know helped fuel the victories last November. I think we'll end up with 60. I think we'll end up with 60. We may actually get 61. But we could go down to 59 or 58. It's not going to be something that we should all worry too much about if we lose a few seats in 10, because this is very, very common. The electorate is nothing if not fickle. They want change. They don't care who's there. They just want change. So, yes.
In light of what happened yesterday, what are the chances of getting an assault weapons ban?
Well, first of all, it's not clear that the weapon, I've not seen all the coverage, but I have not yet gotten confirmation that there was an assault weapon that was used. And yeah, semi-automatic. I think he had handguns, and I think they're thinking that the carnage was so significant because of ricochet, because it was such a closed environment. It's a real problem. And I will be, it's so tempting to tell you what I think you want to hear, but it's not who I am. I have a tendency to just kind of put it out there. I think it is highly unlikely that the current Congress does anything on gun control. And in states like mine, where hunting is a part of growing up, we had cream and mushroom soup in my cabinet growing up because my mom had to put it on all the stuff my dad shot so we could eat it. It is an incredibly important part of the culture in Missouri, and they're very worried about people that would mess with that sportsman culture. I have been somebody who has never had the endorsement and will never have the endorsement of the NRA. That's okay with me, but I just want to give you an honest answer that I think it's unlikely politically that there's the political will to do anything in the gun control front. It's going to have to come up from the bottom. If people get angry enough and enough people get motivated, then something will happen, but I don't see that happening right now.
On a much lighter note, can you tell us a little bit about your Twitter life, how it started and grew, and how maybe it informs your thinking a bit?
It's really interesting. I'm kind of sick of it. Honestly, I started it because I get so tired of people trying to edit me. One of the things that happens in Washington, I remember watching the Sunday morning shows before I ever came to Washington, and watching these people talk, and Jonathan Alter excluded, they go on and on and on for 3 paragraphs and never say anything. And I remember sitting there going, I cannot believe that guy talked that long and never said a thing. And what happens to you is you start shaving the edges because you don't want to make anybody mad. So you shave an edge, and then pretty soon you are answering a question by not answering the question. So you might imagine that my attitude about this causes my communications staff heartburn, and they are constantly saying, now, Claire, be careful what you say. Are you sure you want to say it that way? Are you sure you want to do this? Every time I'm out there trying to plant the flag. And so this was a moment that nobody could edit me. And after the screeching ended from my communications department, when I said, no, I'm doing it myself, I'm going to say what I think, and that's the end of the discussion, I kind of got into it. It was kind of fun 2 or 3 times a day to think, what would the people at home want to know about what's going on? Tried to give a little inside information, tried to be honest about what was happening. Well, but what has happened is I read all the tweet replies. I don't follow people because it would be overwhelming. I read all the tweet replies, and we need to be honest about one thing. The passion right now in this country is not on the side of the policies that Barack Obama is pushing for. The galvanization that has occurred, the energy that is emanating out from grassroots, most of the noise I hear are from people that have never voted for me and will never vote for me. And they tweet me constantly, and they say such mean things. So now I open it, and I just go, oh no, it's like, oh, they're just, I'm a crook, my family's a crook, I'm a liar, Obama is Hitler, he's a socialist, you're a socialist, we're all communists, and it's multiple, and so, that's gotten a little tiresome. So I am not as enamored with it as I was at first, but I still think it's a great tool. I get great tweets from Missourians that are written by them, that are one tweet, not this multiple AstroTurf lobbying that's now going on Twitter. And I still like to be able to have that moment where I can just drive my staff crazy, and I know they're reading the tweet going, I can't believe she put that out on the airwaves. So that part's fun.
Senator McCaskill, I understand that you were a successful game show contestant back in the 1970s. So I've got a trivia question for you about women in politics.
I was a successful what?
Game show contestant?
I was a game show contestant.
And so I've got a trivia question for you about women.
Okay.
I got a trivia question for you about women in politics. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, there are only 2 states in the Union that have never elected a woman as either governor, as a U.S. Senator, or as a U.S. member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Can you name one?
A governor, a U.S. Senator, or member of the United States House of Representatives.
Only 2 states. Name
Well,
one.
it would probably be, one of those southern places, but I know that we had George Wallace's wife served as governor. Oh, now you want me to do geography. Mississippi.
The other's Iowa.
Iowa. Wow. That is surprising. It's because that's a very progressive state. Yeah, it is true. It is true. I love game shows, and I'd watched them all the way growing up, and I got out of law school, and I had this huge student debt. I'd worked my way through law school as a waitress, and so I scheduled my first vacation for a week. They were all taping the game shows in LA, and I went out and slept on a couch of a friend of mine from college and tried out for all the game shows, and I was a 4-day champion of the game show High Rollers with Alex Trebek, and paid off my student loans by being the champion, so. Yes, back in the back.
Senator, a lot has been done, obviously, to increase or to advance the participation of women in politics, but what more do you think needs to be done, and what can we do to increase participation, especially minorities?
Well, I think what is happening now is women are now seeing other women in office more frequently, and so much of this is role modeling. We can all, at least I don't know if everyone here was a supporter of the president, but one of the most remarkable things that has happened by his election is how it has changed role modeling for so many young people in this country, what they can see themselves as. So I think the more that those of us who are in public office reach out to young people in all parts of our communities and cities, particularly in those parts of our cities and communities where there are a lot of kids that aren't getting that kind of role modeling at home or on the corner, I think that's very, very important. And there's a lot of leadership programs that are out there now. And I certainly urge you in your community to look, and I'm sure there are many people in this room that are aware of leadership programs for young women. We have a great one in Missouri called the Greater Women Leadership Conference, where young women who've come out of college and jobs are selected, and they have a special program. They go all over the state with other women and meet women who are in business and in politics, and it kind of gives them a network. But don't be afraid to ask women that you admire to help you. Most of us would feel way too guilty not doing it. So I don't see the microphone.
I'm over here.
Okay.
Hi. Hi, my name's Lizbeth. I'm a McVell alumni. My question is, right now there's a huge issue with the whole abortion, with the kids who are underage, for them to have parental, with the parental rights and so on and so forth. So I guess my question to you is, once again, with health care, with the Republicans, it seems like abortion to them, that funding will go towards that and so on and so forth. So I just want to know, what are your stands and what would you have to say to that?
Well, you know, I have run for office my entire career as a pro-choice candidate, and I mean, the secret's out in Missouri. Everybody knows that. They certainly have been reminded it many, many times in 20-some elections I've run in Missouri. So I am not afraid to say that I'm pro-choice. I will tell you, it will be interesting. I don't know if this two-pack amendment's been voted on yet, but when they invoked the rule for the debate in the House this morning, there had clearly been a deal made that one of the two amendments that would be voted on was the Stupak Amendment, and the Stupak Amendment would take the Hyde law a little bit further, and the current federal law is that no federal tax dollars can be used to fund abortions. There is a group of about 15 or 16 Democrats in the House that have said that if that amendment doesn't pass, they won't vote for the health care bill. In fact, my husband and I were talking about it, watching the debate this morning, what a difficult position that puts many of us in, because we really want the health care bill, and we really need the votes to pass it in the House. So I will tell you, not afraid to be pro-choice, but really nervous that that issue could bring down health care. I think the final chapter hasn't been written yet.
And this will be our last question. Thank you.
This is more a testimonial than a question. We're here about women in politics, and everyone from the North Shore would know the name Grace Mary Stern. Grace Mary Stern ran for lieutenant governor. Grace Mary Stern was a member of the Illinois House of Representatives. Grace Mary Stern was an Illinois state senator. And during all that time, between she and her husband Hub, between the what they called the biologicals and the fosters, they were the parents of 10 children. So we have these role models in Illinois, and I think everybody in the North Shore would agree she was a wonderful, wonderful lady, and I just feel obligated to mention her name here. Thank you.
I think it's terrific you did. I think it's terrific you did. Once again, it's remarkable that so many of you took time out on a day like today to do this. It shows that you really care about what's going on. I almost said something that was not ladylike. It really shows that you are, we all put, the flag stuff on our lapels, and we put the ribbons on the back of our cars, and this is a room full of patriots, and you should congratulate yourself for that. Thank you very much.